The old house stood on the edge of town for many years, shrouded in stories and whispers of strange events. In the corner of the backyard, almost completely hidden by tall grass and lilac bushes, was an old metal hatch. No one knew where it led, and everyone wisely stayed away from it. One hot summer day, 3 teenagers, Max, Alina, and Andrei, decided to explore the yard of the abandoned house. They had heard the legends about it, and their youthful curiosity outweighed common sense. Wandering through the overgrown yard, Max stumbled upon the metal hatch. It was rusty but had a sturdy handle. "Look what I found!" he exclaimed, trying to lift the lid. Alina and Andrei came closer. Together, they strained and opened the hatch. A musty, damp air wafted out, mixed with a faint, eerie smell. Nothing could be seen in the darkness. "Maybe it's some old cellar?" Alina suggested, but there was nervousness in her voice. Max, always the bravest, took a flashlight from his backpack and shone it down. The beam of light barely pierced the thick darkness, but they saw stone steps leading down. "Shall we go take a look?" Max asked, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Andrei hesitated. "I don't know. I don't like this." But Alina's curiosity had already taken over. "Come on. What's there to be afraid of?" One by one, they descended the slippery steps. The smell grew stronger and the air heavier. Max's flashlight barely illuminated their path. The stairs ended in a small stone corridor. The walls were damp, covered in moss, and a quiet dripping sound echoed from somewhere. "Where does this lead?" Alina whispered, looking around. Suddenly, they heard a rustling sound. Came from the darkness ahead. Max sharply directed the flashlight beam there, but saw nothing. "What was that?" Andrei asked, startled. They moved on, trying to walk as quietly as possible. The corridor led them to a spacious underground room. Thick dust hung in the air, and strange symbols, drawn by something unknown, were visible on the walls. In the center of the room stood an old wooden table with an open book on it. Max cautiously approached the table. The pages of the book were yellowed and cracked with age, and the incomprehensible signs written on them evoked an unpleasant feeling. As Max leaned in for a better look, a quiet, hoarse sound, like a sob, came from a dark corner of the room. All 3 froze, their hearts pounding wildly. Max slowly turned the flashlight in that direction. In the shadows, they saw something. At first, it seemed like just a mass of darkness, but then it began to take shape. A tall, twisted figure, seemingly made of the night itself. Its face was hidden by the darkness, but they felt unseen eyes fixed on them. The quiet sob repeated, this time closer. Then, a thin, bony hand reached out from the darkness. The teenagers screamed in terror. Instinctively, they rushed back towards the corridor. The figure in the shadows began to move slowly after them, its steps silent but chilling. They ran down the corridor, their lungs burning. Reaching the stairs, they nearly fell, trying to climb up as quickly as possible. When they finally scrambled out into the bright sunlight, it felt like salvation. They slammed the metal hatch shut and ran away from the old house, not looking back. From that day on, they never spoke of what they had seen below. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, they thought they could hear that quiet, hoarse sob again, coming from under the ground, from somewhere in the corner of their yard. And they knew that something down there was still waiting. A week passed. Max, Alina, and Andrei tried to return to their normal lives, but the terrifying discovery in the basement of the abandoned house was firmly lodged in their minds. None of them dared to speak about it, as if afraid to reawaken that nightmarish memory. One evening, Max couldn't fall asleep. The image of the tall, dark figure from the basement constantly flashed before his eyes. He got out of bed and went to the window. Moonlight flooded the yard, and suddenly his gaze fell on the corner of the garden. There, among the shadows of the lilac bushes, The dark rectangle of the old hatch was barely visible. His heart began to beat wildly. It seemed to him that a faint whisper was coming from down there. He strained his ears but heard only the night chirping of insects. "It's all my imagination," Max thought, but the uneasy feeling didn't leave him. The next day, Alina called Max. Her voice trembled. "I think someone is watching me," she whispered. "I constantly feel someone's gaze." That same evening, Andre told them both that he was having the same nightmare. A dark corridor, stone walls, and a quiet, hoarse sob in the darkness. They realized that what they had seen in the basement hadn't stayed there. It had somehow seeped into their lives, poisoning their thoughts and causing paranoia. Max decided they had to do something. They couldn't just live in this fear. "We have to go back," he said during their meeting. Alina and Andre looked at him with horror.
"No."
"No way," Alina exclaimed. "I don't want to go back there. But if we don't, it will never leave us alone," Max insisted. "We have to find out what it was." After much hesitation, Alina and Andre reluctantly agreed. Fear gnawed at them, but they understood that Max was right. The unknown is always scarier than the known. The following evening, armed with flashlights and determination, they found themselves again near the old house. The spider-like creature caught up to them, clicking its sharp limbs. The teenagers were trapped between two terrifying beings. Max quickly looked around. His gaze fell on the open book on the table. Instinctively, he felt that the answer might be there. As the creatures approached, Max grabbed the book. The pages rustled as he quickly flipped through them, trying to understand the incomprehensible signs. Suddenly, his gaze stopped on one symbol. It seemed familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. And then he remembered the same symbol was etched on the metal lid of the hatch. Not understanding why, Max felt he had to do something with this book. He held it up, as if offering it to the creatures. The reaction was immediate. The tall, dark figure froze, its unseen eyes seeming to look at the book with horror. The spider-like creature also stopped, its glowing eyes dimming. The quiet whisper they had been hearing grew louder, turning into an unintelligible murmur. The symbols on the walls began to glow faintly. Max felt the book vibrate in his hands. Fear gave way to a strange understanding. The book was the key. Not knowing what to do next, Max instinctively began to read the signs from the book aloud. His voice trembled, but the words sounded clearly in the underground silence. As soon as he uttered the last symbol, the room began to shake. The light from the symbols on the walls grew brighter, searing their eyes. The tall, dark figure screamed, a chilling, inhuman sound that pierced them to the bone. The spider-like creature thrashed convulsively on the floor. Then, just as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The light faded, the murmuring ceased. The tall figure vanished, dissolving into the darkness. The spider-like creature lay motionless. Terrified but alive, Max, Alina, and Andre rushed to the stairs. They scrambled out into the fresh air, gasping for breath. This time, they didn't close the hatch. They knew they would never return here again. From that evening on, their nightmares disappeared. The feeling of an alien presence vanished. But they would never forget what they had seen in the darkness beneath the old house. And they would always remember the book that had saved their lives. However, sometimes, when passing by the abandoned house, they felt a faint chill, and it seemed to them that something unseen was watching them from the dark opening of the hatch. And they knew that evil never truly disappears. It simply waits in the darkness, ready to break free again. Years passed. Max, Alina, and Andre went their separate ways. But the horrific events of that summer forever bound them with an invisible thread. They rarely spoke of the basement, trying to bury those memories deep in their subconscious. Max became an architect, Alina a teacher, and Andre a programmer. Outwardly, their lives seemed ordinary, but deep down, each of them carried the imprint of the terror they had experienced. One autumn evening, Max received a strange letter with no return address. Inside was only one old, yellowed photograph. It depicted the same metal hatch in the corner of the abandoned house's yard. A cold shiver ran down Max's spine. A few days later, Andrei called Alina. His voice sounded troubled. "You won't believe what I dreamed," he said. "That basement and the book." That same night, Alina woke up from a nightmare. She saw the dark corridor again, the flickering symbols on the walls, and heard that same quiet, hoarse sob. They understood that the evil they had encountered had not been completely defeated. It was simply waiting for its time. The photograph and the nightmares were ominous signs, reminders of unfinished business. Max contacted Alina and Andrei. After much deliberation, they decided they had to go back. Not to face the horror again, but to finally put an end to it. Many years later, they stood once more before the old, even more dilapidated house. The hatch in the corner of the yard was almost completely hidden under thick grass and fallen leaves. This time they were older, more cautious. Max brought more powerful flashlights than before. Andrei had found mentions of similar symbols and rituals in old books. Alina brought holy water and a crucifix, although she herself didn't fully believe in their power. With a heavy heart, Max pushed aside the rusty lid of the hatch. A musty, damp air wafted up again, but this time the stench was stronger, almost unbearable. They descended into the darkness. The stairs seemed even more slippery and dangerous. A chilling silence filled the corridor. Little had changed in the large room. The symbols on the walls still glowed faintly. The table stood in the same place, but the book was gone. Suddenly, they heard that same quiet sob. It came from the dark corner of the room. They cautiously shone their flashlights there. In the shadows stood the same tall, dark figure. It seemed even more gaunt and sinister. Its unseen eyes still pierced them with cold. But this time, they didn't flee. They had come to fight. Andrei took an old tome from his backpack and began to quietly read an incantation he had found in the books. His voice trembled, but the words sounded resolute. Alina sprinkled holy water on the walls, her prayer echoing softly in the underground silence. Max, holding a powerful flashlight ready, directed its beam straight at the dark figure. The incantation and the holy water seemed to have some effect. The dark figure twitched, as if burned by something. Its quiet sob turned into a hoarse hiss. Suddenly, the spider-like creature appeared from behind the figure. It looked even larger and more aggressive than before. Its glowing eyes blazed with hatred. The battle was short and terrifying. Andrei continued to read the incantation, his voice growing stronger. Alina fearlessly sprinkled the creatures with holy water. Max tried to keep them in the beam of light, knowing that darkness gave them strength. Gradually, the dark figure began to weaken, its outlines becoming blurred. The spider-like creature clicked its legs desperately but retreated under the onslaught of light and prayer. Finally, a piercing scream echoed, and both creatures dissolved into the air, leaving behind only the smell of sulfur and mustiness. Silence fell in the basement. The symbols on the walls faded. The feeling of terror receded, replaced by a heavy, exhausting relief. They knew it was over. They were finally free from this nightmare. Climbing back to the surface, they filled the hatch with earth and stones. They didn't want anyone else to stumble upon this cursed place. From that day on, their nightmares disappeared forever. They were able to move on with their lives, carrying the scar of what they had experienced in their hearts, but free from its power. However, sometimes on quiet evenings, they remembered that old house and the hatch in the corner of the yard, and they understood that there are things in the world that are better left in the dark, not awakened by our curiosity. Sometimes the unknown is our greatest protection.